Hey guys, Matthew and welcome to episode number 12 of the Abusing Harvest series. In today's episode, we'll be looking at cast on crit jewels, so triple multi-jewels with life or ES. Now, what I'll be showing you guys in this video is basically going to be how to make the CI cast on crit jewels, but the same method can be applied to literally any jewel that are crit multi in either life or energy shield. For example, this one here, which I made with dual wielding crit with global and melee crit with life instead. So it is more about the method than the actual crafting itself. The only thing that is going to change is basically the base jewel that we're going to be buying. So these jewels go for about 4 to 5x, as you can see. Ever since I showed it on stream, they started going down in price a little bit. But before, the first ones that I made were selling very easily for 5x, and actually 5x was by far the cheapest prices you could find. And after this video, I expect them to go down even more, but that's okay. So, this version, we are looking for CI cast on crit jewels, which are basically going to be Cobalt jewels. The reason why we go Cobalt jewels is because it is the only jewel that can roll energy shield as a prefix. All the other ones can only roll life. So in this case, we're looking for Cobalt jewel. So to make these jewels here, these ones here, we are looking for basically energy shield with crit multi for cold skills. Because if I look at the crit in terms of prefixes on Cobalt jewels, there's really nothing we care about because fire and lightning doesn't apply and crit chance is useless. Therefore, it is really just crit multi. Therefore, we go for the energy shield prefix instead of some additional damage because it's just worth more. In terms of suffixes, though, we are looking for crit, either multiplier for spells, elemental skills, or global. So 2 of these 3, and that is how we are going to get jewels that look something like this: 4x, 5x, 6x, depending on the rolls and depending how good they are. So how do we make them? Well, the first thing we're going to make is basically a filter that allows us to get the proper jewel bases. So we are going to be looking for Cobalt jewels with critical strike multiplier for cold skills alongside either critical strike multiplier as a global or for elemental skills. I'll go into why that is real quick. So again, the only critical multiplier that we care for in terms of prefixes is the cold skills because we're going for CI cast on crit jewels. And there is no other crit stats that we care for, so we are going for ES. Now, we don't need this stat because technically we could force it on the critical to cold skills by just forcing on, say, a cold modifier and by having only open prefixes. Now, it would become, say, 200 weighting in, like, I don't know, let's see, 400... 900, 1,100, 1,300. So it's about a 1 in 5 crit rerolls to actually get the multiplier for cold skills. That being said, if we can just buy it on a jewel that's already there, it is going to simplify the crafting of the said jewel. The next thing we're going to want is basically a count of either global multi or critical strike multiplier for elemental skills. Now these are basically our crit suffixes that we care for. And we are going to be wanting one of these two. Now, why do we want one of these two? Well, it's pretty simple. We can force on the last one. So if we look at the critical multiplier, the global has nothing but the critical tag. The spells has the critical in caster, and the crit multiplier for elemental has the critical elemental. Therefore, we can't force them except for the critical strike multiplier for spells because we can actually force on caster modifier. So if we look at caster modifier on jewels, you'll see that there's cast speed, attack and cast speed. There's also crit chance for spells, and that is basically it. So if we look at the weighting, there's 500 here alongside 850. 1,000, 1,250, which means 1 in 5 caster rerolls should amount to basically forcing the critical strike multiplier for spells. And fortunately for us, caster rerolls are very, very cheap. So let's talk about how we are going to turn, say, this 40C jewel here into a 4 Exalt jewel. So this one's actually quite nice because it's almost fully done for us already. So if I was to buy this one here for 40 chaos, you'd see that it has critical strike chance to spells, crit chance for cold skills, multi global, and critical strike multiplier for cold skills. Now if I look at, again, in terms of crit for prefixes, there is the multi for cold, and there's also the crit chance for cold. So the first thing that we would do with this jewel here is remove a random cold skill. Now, if I remove a random cold modifier, there is a 50% chance I'll hit the crit chance and a 50% chance I'll hit the multi. If I hit the crit chance, that is good. That means we're good to go. If I hit the multi, that means I need to re-roll that cold again until I get it back, until I get my multi back, at which point I would have the multi for cold, the crit multi, the crit chance for spells would be gone, and the crit chance for cold skills would be gone, and the crit chance for spells would remain. So the crit chance for cold skills, since it would be gone, we could actually go ahead and augment a defense modifier for a 1 in 3 chance of getting the percent energy shield. We could also re-roll that, obviously by doing remove a defense modifier, add a new defense modifier, so a 1 in 3 chance to get that energy shield. At which point we would have the multiplier for cold skills, the global multi, the energy shield instead of the crit chance for spells, and then the crit chance for cold skills, my bad. And the critical strike chance for spells, again, if we look at crit suffixes, the critical strike chance for spells has the caster tag. Therefore, I could remove re-add caster an average of about 5 times, and then I would be guaranteed my critical strike multiplier for spells, at which point I would have turned this 40 Chaos Jewel into a 4 to 5 Exalt Jewel, which is kind of insane. So let's go ahead and do one that's a little bit more complex, and let's look at this one here, for example, because this one's going to be a little bit more interesting, and most of the ones you buy are probably going to look something like this. So this one's got our multiplier with cold skills and our global critical strike multiplier, but unfortunately it has 2 tags that we can't get rid of. Mana doesn't have a tag, it has the mana tag, and we cannot get rid of the mana tag. And then the other one is area damage. Area damage also does not have a tag. So these are a little bit more interesting, and these are the ones that you'll be getting most of the time anyways. So the question becomes, how do we actually get these done? So it's actually very, very simple. You're going to remove a non-critical modifier, add a new critical modifier instead. So by doing this twice, we are guaranteed to get rid of the mana, and we are guaranteed to get rid of the area damage. Now there's only basically like one little tiny issue with this. So if we get the global crit multi and the crit multi for cold skills, the mana is going to be turned into a crit if we do non-crit to crit. Now what can we get in terms of crit modifiers instead of the mana? Well, we can get any of the crit chance to any elemental and then any of the multi for any elemental, but we already have the multi for cold. So the best case scenario is that we get either crit chance for fire or lightning or multi for fire or lightning. So 4 in 5 of the different outcomes are perfect because you can just remove that fire or lightning modifier, and then you can go ahead and re-add another by adding in the defense modifier, which is going to serve as our energy shield. Now the worst case scenario is if that mana turns into critical strike chance for cold skills, because at this point you have to 50-50 remove a cold modifier to get rid of either the crit chance or the multi. And again, if you get rid of the multi, you have to reroll cold until you get the multi for cold skills back, at which point you can augment defense to guarantee your energy shield. Now what about the suffixes though? So the suffixes is basically area damage, and if I turn this non-crit to crit, I'm guaranteed once again to get crit. So what can I get? Well, I can get global crit chance. Now global crit chance is fine because we can simply remove an attack modifier since it has the attack tag. We can't get the global multi because it already has it. We can get critical strike chance to spells, and that is perfectly fine as well, because if we get critical strike chance to spells, we can just re-roll the caster modifier until we get crit multi for spells, which is like a 1 in 5. Then we get critical strike chance for elemental skills, and this is the worst case scenario. If you get critical strike chance for elemental skills, there is no way of getting rid of this safely, because if you remove a critical modifier, there's a 50% chance you'll hit the global multi and a 50% chance you will hit the critical strike chance with elemental skills. So this is literally the one thing, the one step that can break your jewel to some extent. Because if you do get this, it's a 50-50, and if you do get rid of the multiplier, then it becomes very, very difficult, because critical modifier rerolls are actually fairly expensive. Which is why this is like the one thing that you can get that you really, really, really don't want to. But if you look at all the different outcomes, it is one outcome out of every single other outcome, because obviously we can get critical multiplier for spells, which would be perfect, and we can also get critical multiplier with elemental skills, which is also perfect. So this is fine because we can remove attack and then augment caster to force on the crit multi for spells. This we already have. This we can reroll. This is bad. This is fine. This is fine. And in the prefixes, this is fine. This is bad. This is fine. This is fine. This is, well, we already have it, and this is fine. So there are not very many things that can go wrong unless you get very, very unlucky. But even then, forcing back on what you care for is probably not going to cost you that much. Now, these jewels go for about 50 C to 100 chaos. Before I started streaming it, this method, I bought 8 of them for 40 chaos. So that is actually what you can expect to pay for them if you're willing to be a little patient. Now, of course, I streamed it all day, and they sold very quickly, so people are going to be doing this themselves. And if they make this video, it's probably going to be even worse. But you can simply whoop, like, live search these jewels and pick it up whenever they do pop up for a little bit, of an affordable price. But even if you were to pay a full-fledged exalt for these bases, you could pretty much easily double your currency anyways. Because even if you bought every single craft, non-crit to crit is a 20 C craft or a 30 C craft. And then caster rerolls are like 20 C a pop. So it is very, very cheap to actually turn a crappy jewel like this into a much more interesting jewel that will look something like this. And again, though, if you're playing any other build that would rather have, say, life instead of energy shield, and let's say, I don't know, dual wielding instead of to cold skills, it is the exact same method, except that you need to look at the tags on the actual mods that you care for and which other roles have these given tags. But in the reality, what I just explained would apply to everything else, because as I shown, I did craft some jewels with life, and those worked just fine with the exact same method. So before I go, though, I do want to say a huge thank you to my supporters: Gaikona, Kfish, Zachary, Luro, Dr. Scott, Dr. Radu, Scott, Casicus, Francesco, Amazos Korov, Mr. Coffee, Mario, and Jungle Dog, as well as anybody else who wishes to remain anonymous, and of course, anybody else who supports me through different platforms. I hope this video was informative, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.